Welcome into the Cool Grandpa Podcast. This is the podcast where we talk to grandfathers, adult grandchildren, and experts in areas of importance to grandfathers. Whether you're a new grandfather, a seasoned pro, or somebody interested in learning about relationships, this is the place for you. So come on in, join us as we learn together, laugh together, and support each other on the Cool Grandpa Podcast. Hi, this week's guest is going to be Cynthia Covey Haller. Now, Cynthia is the daughter of Stephen R. Covey. Stephen, as you probably have heard that name before, is the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, as well as a number of other books. Cynthia and I are going to sit down and we're going to talk about her book that she wrote with her father called Life In Crescendo. Your most important work is always ahead of you. And I love this book because it's really an invitation for those of us that are starting to reach the second half of life to work to build ourselves, build up our own habits, our own interests, so that we can then pour into our families and our communities the best version of ourselves. Now, Cynthia and Stephen were very passionate about, hey, when you get to these ages of maybe retirement, that's just one phase that's gone away. And the second phase is to build up into that crescendo mentality, to build up into that crescendo, which is really being able to live your life to the fullest. And what we mean by that is being able to pour yourself into your family, into your community, to continue to grow and develop yourself so that you have so many more talents, so many more skills, so much more energy to pour into other people. Before we get started, though, I wanted to remind you that Google Podcast is going away. So if you're still using that for your podcast player, you need to be able to transition out of that before April 2nd. That's when Google's going to shut down their podcast application. I believe they're trying to move everything over to YouTube and have that as the one source for all their media. The other thing I want to remind you of is Buy Me a Coffee. It's a great way to support the podcast and to support the efforts that I've got going on to talk to grandfathers, experts in areas around the important subjects that grandfathers have. And it's just a great way to help out with offsetting the cost of the podcast. So you can go to buymeacoffee.com and look for the Cool Grandpa. The other way to do that is to go to my website, look at the show notes over on the right-hand side of every episode. There's a link that takes you right to where you can make a small contribution. And again, that just kind of helps me offset some of the costs out of pocket that I have to produce and to publish this podcast. So without further ado, let's jump into this conversation with Cynthia. You're going to absolutely love listening to her. Hi, Cynthia. Welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. I'm excited to have you on to talk about this book that you co-wrote.
Thanks so much, Greg, for having me on. And I'm excited to hear about the Cool Grandpa Podcast. That sounds amazing, even though I'm a grandma.
Well, we love grandmas too, that's for sure. And we recognize how important they are. And what really prompted me to reach out to you was this book that you had co-written with your father, Life In Crescendo, because that is a theme that I've been talking about on the Cool Grandpa Podcast, that, hey, it's not time just to kick back and relax, but we've got a lot of stuff to do, whether it's businesses or investing in our lives or our children or whatever it is.
That's right. You know, Greg, this is the whole reason my father came up with this idea, is because he was in his 70s and still teaching and consulting and traveling and doing a lot professionally. And people would ask him, when are you going to hang it up? You know, when are you going to retire? And to him, the R word was a bad word. And he thought, why should I quit? I feel passionate about what I'm doing. I feel like I'm making a contribution. I still have many more ideas and, I'm not done yet. And so he actually adopted the phrase Life In Crescendo as his personal mission statement the last 10 years of his life.
Oh, that's awesome. And it reminds me so much. I just had a mentor of mine pass away, a gentleman named Dan Miller, who had written 48 Days to the Work You Love. And I was part of his group. even into November and the first part of December, before he announced he was getting sick, he was like, hey, I'm making plans for the next 10 to 20 years, which would take him well into his 90s. But that was his mentality. And your father sounds like they were definitely birds of a feather there.
Yep. He believed that it was a false dichotomy that you had to either keep working or retire. And he felt the third alternative was make a contribution. And that's something that you could do at any stage or age of your life, but particularly in this second half, this age where a lot of people retire, that was the greatest opportunity to really make a difference and contribute to the lives of others around them.
Before we get too far down the road, I do want to take a little bit of a step back and just get a little bit of the history about why you guys felt this book needed to be coming out, because there's so many other books out there, so many other interests, but this one really comes across when you read it like, hey, there was something kind of pushing and motivating you two to come up with this.
Right. It totally was his enthusiasm and passion for this topic, and I felt it. But he one day it kind of prompted me getting involved, because one day I foolishly asked him, "Hey, Dad, are you ever going to write anything as good as the 7 Habits?" And it just like insulted him. He's like, "Gosh, I wrote that in 1989. What have I been doing for the last 30, 40 years? I get up every day with the idea that to write and to speak and to inspire. And I hope that's not my last contribution, 7 Habits, which was very successful. I mean, it sold 40 million copies and it's still in the top 10 business books to this day, 33 years later, which is amazing. But he did produce a lot of other books after that, The 8th Habit, The Third Alternative, and one that he was working on. He told me, I have several books in my head right now. And this was in 2008. And he said, I'm really excited about Live Life in Crescendo. And so he asked me, probably because I insulted him and said, is that all you've got? He asked me to take the materials, to interview him and take these ideas and find inspiring examples of people who live in crescendo. And can I define that for the audience?
Yes,
Greg?
yes, please do.
Okay. Are you musical at all?
Yes. Well, up through high school band.
Okay. It sounds like us as well. My mother had a beautiful singing voice, but my dad didn't at all. But we all love music. And crescendo is a musical term. If you've been to a concert or heard a symphony, you know what a crescendo is. It builds in power, in strength, in energy. It just swells and fills the arena. It's just incredible. And it keeps going and keeps growing in energy and power. Well, the opposite symbol is diminuendo. And that slows down and loses power and energy and just goes so slow that eventually it comes to an end, totally stops. And so the idea of living in crescendo in your life means you keep learning, you keep growing, you keep reinventing yourself if needed, you keep changing despite past failures or even successes, to look ahead, to think, what can I contribute to those around me, so that you're not what you were yesterday. You like your mentor, you plan ahead, you have many great things you want to bring about. Because the subtitle of this book is as important as the title. The title is Live Life in Crescendo. Your most important work is always ahead of you. And my father sincerely and passionately believed that and lived it. And I caught the fire from it. And he asked me to do this. And he passed away, we think prematurely, but we know God's hand was in it. And so he had asked me, one of the last things that we talked about is he wanted me to finish this book and get it out. So he passed away in 2012, and it took me 10 years to finish it, with everything I had with my kids and grandkids and what I'm doing in the community and everything. And so I finally finished it, and Simon & Schuster, who published his first book, 7 Habits, now published his last. So that was pretty fulfilling to get that out in 2022.
Oh, that was a great way to just close that circle. and kind of wrap that up, because both of them are perfect bookends, right? I mean, one is, hey, here's tactically how you go about being a successful person in whether it's a business environment or something else. And then this one is, hey, this is how you continue to live and be full of life.
Exactly. We think of this as his capstone habit to the 7 habits, and the 8th habit, which is find your voice and help others find theirs. So this just continues that what are you about today? What are you going to do? When my father always said, when you're driving a car, you're looking ahead. But what if you were driving and you looked only in your rear view mirror at what you left, at what's behind you, or you kept glancing over your shoulder? I mean, you're going to end up in a ditch pretty soon. So he said, don't look in the rear view mirror at your failures and what didn't work out, or even your successes. Maybe you've been very successful in your career, in your family, in your community, but what are you going to do looking ahead? How can you contribute in Crescendo now and looking forward?
Oh, I love that. And one of the things that I enjoyed about the book was that it was, to me, I was getting the impression that it's an invitation as well as a calling, meaning, hey, if you choose to live a larger life, if you choose to be more engaged, here's the rewards. And then there's also a little bit of a calling, like, hey, if you happen to be sitting on your hands or you're laying back a little bit, we're calling you out to come join us and come help the greater community.
That you've nailed it, Greg. That's exactly it. My father believed, and this is the whole reason he wrote this book. We expanded it into other areas. It really applies from day one till you pass away. But his whole goal was to inspire people in this age of life, the cool grandpa and grandma stage, that you can make contributions that will be your legacy and that will still continue. And the people that there's in the book, he talks about Dr. Selvig, who is a psychologist who found that people need stress in their life. They need helpful stress, which is called eustress. It's a Greek word. Helpful, beneficial stress is eustress, EUSTRESS. Distress is the harmful stress that we all feel, with that causes maybe health problems and things. But he found that if people don't have a reason to get up in the morning, particularly if they have left their day jobs or they retired from a profession or a career, and they don't have a purpose or a meaning in their life to get up for every day, and that adrenaline flow, that eustress, that they will die prematurely. And he also always felt that the meaning of life, this is what Pablo Picasso said, the meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. So we all need eustress as we age to keep us going, ironically.
Well, and that's what I love about this, because one of the things that I remember even being a young person in school was having some of the seniors that were auditing courses that were able to come in and take a course for free, essentially. And they would just sit there and they're learning something else. Somebody that was a CPA their whole life, and now they're sitting and we're learning about Greek history. And they're actually, they're challenging themselves. They're being engaged in that way.
That keeps the blood flowing, doesn't it? And it keeps your mind going, and it keeps you looking ahead, thinking, how can I make a contribution? And we talk a lot about contribution in this book, that life is about contribution, not accumulation. That's a great message to give our grandkids, that we teach them that you may retire from a career or a job, my father always said, but never retire from making meaningful contributions to your family and to those around you. That's what gives you the purpose and the meaning to get up and get going and accomplish something.
Oh, I love that. One of the items, too, that struck me as I was reading this book, as well as some of the others, has to do with the demographics, right? Because at the turn of the century, I think the average life expectancy was around 50. But now we're talking about, I think, mid to late 70s for men, 80, 81 for women. it seems like there's an opportunity here that you and your dad especially have been taking advantage of, which is to redefine this second half of life for the silent generation, for the baby boomers, for Generation X, that it's not just a, come in from the fields or the factories all beat up and sit in the corner, relax, and wait until you pass. But it's like, okay, maybe your day-to-day working life in that sense is done. What are you doing in this next stage?
Exactly. He strongly believed that this stage of life, which we've called the second half of life, which shows, you're not done yet. You can't say, been there, done that, what are you going to contribute now? But this stage of life is the greatest opportunity and actually the best stage to make contributions. Because when you think about it, Greg, as people are in their 70s, 80s, when they decide to maybe step aside from their career and profession their whole life, what greater time do you have more wisdom, more experience, more networking and connections, more money, more resources, more ability to help others, to mentor than right now? So some people think, oh, it's, society tells you, been there, done that, you did well, just sit over there in the corner, go to Florida, lay out, rest, relax. Well, that advice will kill you. You've got to have a purpose in your life. A lot of people know this because my father talked about it in the 7 Habits, and other books. But one of his examples was Viktor Frankl, who is the Austrian psychologist who suffered in the Nazi death camps. And he taught that you don't invent your missions, you detect them. You detect them within yourself, meaning that each of us has an important mission in one way or another to help those around them, to expand their circle of influence. My father always said it's funny how when people get older, their circle of influence tends to shrink when it should be the opposite. It should expand. It should grow. You're building on a lifetime of connections and of experience and wisdom. Now is the time to take what you've learned and to really run with it and look around your community, see what you can do to make a difference. I'm thinking of one woman named Hester Rippey, who at 77 moved to live by her children from another state. And her whole goal coming back was to be a cool grandma, to really get to know her grandkids and to spoil them. But then she looked around her small town and saw that the illiteracy rate was just shockingly low, even with adults. And so she couldn't sit still. It was her mission. It nagged at her. It pulled at her to do something about it. And so she, little by little, she went to the mayor, begged for a little room in the library. It was basically a closet. Then she just expanded more and more, got volunteers. Pretty soon they had a whole mentoring program going for reading with children and adults. And, 15, 20 years later, she has mentored, and the Hester Rippey Literacy Center has exploded, and thousands of people in her small community have learned to read and have had a light turned on with knowledge. So what a difference. She could spoil her grandkids and have fun with them, but isn't there something else that she could be about? And her special mission was literacy. And so in this book, we challenge readers and listeners to be still within themselves, listen to your conscience, look around you, see what needs that you can identify, even starting with your own family. In fact, start with your family. Is there a grandchild that is struggling from an addiction? Do you have a relative that is depressed, that has feels like they don't have any worth or potential? What can you do, beginning with yourself, your family, and your neighborhood, your community, to identify and detect your own mission and to have it be a domino effect and bless the lives of hundreds to thousands of others?
Oh, I love that. And That leads me into something else that I wanted to bring up with you is the transition from, let's say, first stage to second stage, because I think, we can be so heads down as moms and dads about the mortgage, the career, the getting the kids through school, the day-to-day, what I like to call the tactical parts of life, that sometimes moving into that strategic vision in the second half, as the kids maybe are getting into high school and they need you a little bit less, but starting to move that mindset around. Are there any, I don't know, tips or tricks or things that you've come across that kind of help guide those people and help us transition into that mindset of crescendo?
That's a good question. My father defined success differently than most people. He felt that you're successful if you are successful in your most important roles in life. So put on a piece of paper, what are my most important roles? Beginning with being a father, a mother, son, daughter, uncle, aunt. What are my most important roles in these roles that I've identified? And then you're a manager, you are a participant in your community, maybe you're active in your church involvement, maybe you see someone you want to mentor. Put down your different roles and work to be successful in those. So it can seem overwhelming, but you just have to start. Theodore Roosevelt said, do what you can with what you have where you are. Just start small. I'm thinking of a woman that was challenged by a homeless advocate in a meeting to help the homeless, to make a difference and contribute. And she raised her hand and said, let's be realistic. I'm in my 80s and I have a fixed income and I don't get out a lot. How could I possibly make a difference? And this person asked her, could you contribute 1 can of soup a week? And she said, yes. He said, do you think that would make a difference? Think of a single mother opening up that can of soup at night for her family so they didn't go to bed hungry. Does that make a difference to that family? Yeah, I believe it would. And so that woman spent the next 4 or 5 years while she was alive contributing every week 1 can of soup and ultimately fed, dozens, maybe 100 people from that. And so sometimes we think too grandiose. I have a lot of stories about well-known people in the book, but then I have stories about everyday, ordinary people. Another one that I put in there was about a man they called the bike man who passed away. People that went to his funeral saw a couple dozen children's bikes lined up against the church, leaned against it while they went into the service, representing this man who believed that every kid should have a bike in the community. And if a kid didn't have one, they knew to come to the bike man and he would fix one up. He would find one. He would buy one. He would do whatever he could to help this child get a bike. And these bicycles lined up against the church were his legacy, were a contribution he could make. That doesn't change the world, but it sure changed the life and the enjoyment of a dozen kids in his neighborhood. What a contribution he made.
Well, and I love those examples because I think, to your point, there's some great well-known examples. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the work that they did in Africa. And where my old history, background goes is to what Rockefeller and Carnegie, whether you like them or not, but Carnegie founded Carnegie Hall and libraries, most of the public libraries around the U.S. At a certain point, those were all funded from Carnegie. And I think sometimes we do, to your point, go, oh, I can't do what these people have done, so I'm not going to do my part. But I love the calling out that, hey, be the next bike man. If you enjoy like tinkering around in your garage, that's enough. That's good.
That's true. We identify in the book, we talk about myths and truths about the second half of life. One of the things that you need to do is identify what are my unique gifts. And, kindness, generosity are gifts. Being aware of a lonely neighbor across the street whose lawn is yellowed and doesn't get much care And you go over and mow the lawn. You talk to her. You be a friend. Finding someone in the neighborhood, in your church, in your community, in your family that really is struggling, and taking them under your wing and be a mentor. My father defined leadership as communicating another's worth and potential so clearly that they are inspired to see it in themselves. And, you talked about your mentor, Greg. I bet all of us could think of a person that believed in us when we didn't believe in us ourselves, when we didn't think we were worth anything or could do anything, but someone else did. And that was the case with my father. He had a service opportunity when he was 19 and 20 and was given a responsibility to train older people and to travel and to speak. And this terrified him. The president that was over him, his director, said, "You can do this." And he didn't think he could, but he believed in him, and he brought out this potential, and it changed the entire trajectory of my father's life. He was going to come home and he went to Harvard Business School, and the goal was to take over, to work in the family hotel business. It was Covey's Little America in Salt Lake City, and he was going to be a part of that, he and his brother, to run that. But after he discovered he had a gift for teaching and inspiring and taking ideas and helping people see their own worth and potential, and had a vision about it, he told his father, "I want to teach. I don't want to bed bodies." He said, "I want to inspire people." It changed his whole life. So be that mentor, be that person who sees a lonely person, or sees someone who's addicted to a substance, or can't pull himself out, can't do well in school or anything, and write down, who are a couple people who look at me and admire me, and how could I take my unique skills that I've acquired over a lifetime and help propel that person to greatness? Because everyone, he felt like everyone has greatness in them. It just needs to be unleashed.
I love that, because to me, as I was reading through the book, there was a couple of different themes in terms of this mindset and this living life in crescendo. And part of that is becoming more self-aware of yourself, of your skill set. And, you might be an accountant, or you may have gone through and became an IT professional, or you may have done something, and your domain was very focused and very narrow because that's what provided for your life. But as you enter the second half of life, it's an opportunity to explore these other parts of yourself. Find that poet, find that artist that's within you, because that's part of that, right? Because if you can feed yourself and you can grow yourself in that crescendo mindset, then you're able to then pour over into other people, whether it's your community, or maybe it is a big gesture if you have the means.
That's excellent. Your job and your profession should not define you. Like you said, you are more than an engineer. You're more than a janitor. You grew up taking care of school maintenance, or you're more than your labels that are on you. Just two examples here, one well-known and one not well-known. The Carters, Jimmy and Rosalind Carter. We know Rosalind Carter just passed away. What incredible crescendo mentality people those two are. You think about it, Jimmy Carter did not get reelected. He in history, how they rank presidents, they wouldn't consider him a very successful president. And so what are his options? He's done. Didn't get reelected. He goes back to Plains, Georgia. He could give expensive speeches and build a library like most do. Or what happened to him since? He determined, I've still got important work and contributions to make. I mean, what is Jimmy Carter and Rosalind known for all across the world? Habitat for Humanity, the Carter Peace Center, humanitarian. His post-presidency work was greater than his presidency. He won't go down as one of our greatest presidents, but he goes down as one of the presidents that contributed the most as a post-president. And he's still, up until a few years ago when they were still building houses and contributing. So, he didn't live in Diminuendo when that ended, but his life expanded in other areas that he found that he had a passion for and that he was good at. Another man who's not well known was an engineer and decided, I want to try a new career. He was in his 60s when he decided to go into art. And like you said, found the painter within him. He'd always loved it and dabbled in it. And he changed, talk about going from left brain to right brain, changed careers, changed his life in focus, and has since painted hundreds of paintings that have brought him joy and have blessed others to have that art in their lives. So start small and don't label yourself of, this is what I did for my career. And that was my greatest contribution. Carter could have said, well, I'm done. I was the president of the United States. That's what some would consider the pinnacle of success. But he had far greater things ahead to accomplish and bring about. And his greatest contributions were truly ahead of him.
For sure. And another little story about Carter, and it ties in with this Life in Crescendo, in that we're not always going to be able to see what happens because of what we're doing. And the story is that my mother-in-law dearly was a big fan of Jimmy Carter. On one of her visits out here to Atlanta, my wife, Karen, and her mom went down, and Jimmy Carter, up until a few years ago, was still teaching Sunday school.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Sat in that Sunday school class. And that's a moment, a special mother-daughter moment right there that's so meaningful to both of them. He had no idea. I mean, he didn't know, but by being that Sunday school teacher, by volunteering to lead that for his church, that made a huge impact, at least on two individuals and probably a lot more.
Yeah, that I know that he taught Sunday school. I mean, that was his, part of his passion is he loved to teach and contribute in his own church. Here he was the president living in the White House, and now he's teaching in a little church. And when I was speaking and telling the story, I forgot that, of course, the Carters, he's from Georgia. And I'm sure he's revered in your state as well as worldwide. But, he didn't look in the rearview mirror, Greg. He didn't look and say, well, I'm the president, so what else could I do now? He just got to work with Rosalind and made a lot happen. Another man I'm thinking of is named Mike Mason. He worked himself up in the FBI to become the number 4 man. This was 10 years ago. After so long, so he was a representative when they'd ask for a spokesman for the FBI. Sometimes he would speak. And so after the allotted time, they put him into forced retirement. And he hated it. He's like, I'm in my 50s. I've been in the FBI. I've been active. I'm in this forced retirement. I'm going to live in Crescendo, basically. And so he looked around his community and saw that they were lacking in bus drivers. And he applied for the job. He turns in his application, and the head person in the school district called him and said, Mr. Mason, you've been in the FBI. You're number 4 man in the FBI. You've run a business. You've been a CEO of a business. You've done all these things. You really are applying to drive a bus? And he said, we've got to get past the idea that there are no unimportant jobs. What could be more valuable and important than being part of the education system for children in my community? And then he said this profound statement, I continue to progress in my career. Isn't that awesome? And he would be making, I don't know how much a year, which he donated back to the school district. But the point was, he had a purpose to get up in the morning, to drive those kids to school, to make a positive impact on their lives, and to be part of a solution to educate these kids. And it's true, there are no unimportant jobs. What was important was he found a way to contribute. That story really inspires me.
I wanted to take a moment and circle back a little bit because we had talked about the leadership as communicating the worth and the potential about people. And one of the things that really pops up now with so much digital and social media is, it's a cliche. We're so connected, but we're also so disconnected. Is how do you think that we as individuals, whether grandpas and grandmas or just individuals, living a life in Crescendo can best be able to communicate knowing that we've got these digital barriers. I mean, some people prefer text, some people prefer an email, some people prefer these things. It's not the same as going down to the coffee shop every morning, before you start working on the farm. So I'd love to hear some ideas that you have, and what are you coming across?
Well, my father always taught that in relationships, the little things are the big things. You can't lose the one-on-one connection. I've seen teenagers, in a room texting each other in the same room and not talking. And they've found that they have an inability to talk and to speak and to communicate. So technology is awesome. I mean, we're able to Zoom like this and get, this message out to so many more people than if we were to talk one-on-one. So there's a place for it. But relationships, that's one of those most important roles. Your relationships as a parent, as a friend, as a community member, as a church member, as a contributor, those are important roles that we can't lose, and we've got to keep that one-on-one connection. We just took our granddaughter out for a birthday date. We just got some food and went to an ice cream place and sat and talked for an hour and a half and listened to her, had a one-on-one that you could tell, meant the world to her. It didn't cost much money. It didn't take very much time, but she knows that we care about her. And maybe if you don't care if I share a personal example, Greg,
Sure.
At the start of the book, I talk about, that I'm the oldest of 9 children. And you think 9 kids, pretty hard to get around to everybody. And I'm sure it was a challenge for my parents with their busy schedules and everything going. But we all felt like with my mom and dad that we were important to them individually. And one of the ways that happened was through one-on-one communication and private dates that we'd go on with them. And one of them was when I was 12, and my father was consulting and speaking a lot and traveling here and there, although he really prioritized and he didn't miss important things. He just had to plan like a year ahead. And so anyway, he invited me to go to San Francisco with him to one of his conferences. We had planned, part of the fun was anticipating what we would do together. And it's fun to anticipate and talk about it. And we did that for a month or two before. Talk about how he would be speaking and I would play around at the hotel and go swimming and do whatever while he spoke. He said, "You don't want to come hear me. It's just a bunch of boring stuff you've already heard." So I would wait for him at the back of the room the last half hour, and then he would come, would leave, and we would go ride a trolley car. He built up this great image of the trolley cars, what it was like in San Francisco to go up and down the hills on these magical cars. And then we would go to some of the fancy department stores, and he would buy me an outfit for school that I was excited about. And then we would take a taxi to Chinatown and have our favorite food, Chinese food. And then we would go back to the hotel and go swimming before it closed, the pool closed. And then we'd order room service and watch a late movie. And so we had the whole night planned. And to a 12-year-old, this was just amazing. I looked forward to it for so long. And it finally came, and it was going according to plan. I was in the back of the room waiting for him to make his way back to me while people were stopping him and talking to him, when tragedy struck in my mind, and he ran into his college friend that we were best friends in college. He hadn't seen him for years. And I heard him say, "Oh, Stephen, I came to this conference knowing you were speaking. My wife and I would love to whisk you away. We could go down on the wharf and have some seafood and talk tonight and catch up. It'll be amazing. Please come." And I just panicked and thought, could see my trolley car going down the hill without me. And my father seemed excited and happy to see him and said, "Oh, so great to see you. I've got my daughter here as well. Oh, she's welcome to come with us." He looks back at me, and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't want to spend the night with 2 old people I don't know, talking to them. And I just expected the worst. And they kept talking, and my father said, "Gosh, Bob, it's so great to see you. That sounds like so much fun. I would love to do that with you, but not tonight. Cynthia and I have a special date planned, don't we, honey?" And he winked at me and grabbed my hand, and we were out the door before me or Bob knew what happened. And we were outside, and it kind of choked me up. And I said, "But Dad, that's your good friend. I've heard you talk about him, and I guess you haven't seen each other for years. Wouldn't you rather go with him tonight? It's fine if you want to." And he said, "Are you kidding? I wouldn't miss this for anything. And you'd much rather have Chinese food. You hate seafood. Let's go catch a trolley car." And we were out the door. And so as I look back on my life, even as an adult, I have 6 children. I have 25 grandkids. I'm a grandma to 25. That was representative in my childhood of my father set an example of the importance of relationships, what matters most, keeping his word, his priorities, putting first things first. That represented his character to me in a time of stress, probably, and maybe awkwardness for him. But, I felt like his choice and desire to be with me that night made all the difference and inspired me to try to become the kind of grandma and mother that I saw exemplified in him.
That is awesome. And I can relate so much to that. I went on business trips with my father as well, but he used me as cheap labor. It wasn't so much. So I was carrying, boxes of handouts and overhead slide presentation materials and things like that. He used me, like I said, he used me as his cheap labor for his presentations, but still very relatable. And boy, those memories I have of traveling around, and to your point, what a bond, what an example, and something that I've tried to do with my kids, and as my grandkids get older, something like that, where it's, it is that special low tech touch.
That's right. And your dad knew what he was doing. I mean, it was the time together that mattered to he may have put you to work, but it was the time you spent alone with him and together learning that, probably affected you and meant a lot to you looking back.
Oh, absolutely. Taught me how to travel, how to get your bags, at a time too, when everybody could walk in and out of airports, how to make sure that you keep an eye on your bags, and how you do different things, back then when you could still just walk in and walk right up to the gates. But one thing that I'd love to get your opinion on is, when a person chooses to live life in crescendo, what are some of the benefits and ripple effects that you see amongst their family, amongst their friends, the grandchildren?
Well, my father always taught that it's a good example to your kids and your grandkids to not only tend to their interests and try to serve them, but to have your family see you as a person of contribution who's trying to make a difference in the world. He felt that was very valuable. Like the Hester Rippey example, give yourself to your family, do all you can with your relationships, mentor them, but also let them see that you see a large picture, a vision of people that don't have the situation that you have. Maybe aren't as blessed financially, or maybe don't have a good family, or maybe lack direction. That this is an opportunity for you to show your kids, grandma or grandpa go down to the food bank once a month. It's important to them to volunteer. They volunteer in the schools. They read in overcrowded schools to little kids, and they visit lonely people. They serve and give back. It may not affect us, but it affects others in our community. They have expanded their circle of influence. This is a great example for kids and grandkids, especially, to see that their parents and their grandparents are about something larger than themselves, and want to create a domino effect of good, a ripple effect. I'm thinking of an aunt of my husband's who was in her 90s and, didn't get out much, but had a gift for knitting. And she heard that my daughter was going to Romania to work in an orphanage. She went to work making dozens of little slippers, knit slippers for her to take with her. And here's Shannon, my daughter, going to serve there. She also made colorful wall hangings for her to take. So she goes to Romania with all these gifts and to a very drab orphanage with no color and nothing to inspire the kids. She puts these hangings on the wall and she goes around and gives these little hand-knitten, slippers to different children. And what a gift to that orphanage from a woman in her 80s that will never see these kids halfway across the world. And Shannon gave one to a little 10-year-old, and she held him up to her heart and just hugged him and said, "It was my birthday last week and I didn't get a present. This can be my present." So, we can do so much. She just knitted these. She had a gift to do that and didn't know, and will never know or see the impact it had. But what a ripple effect for children in a bleak orphanage that don't have the opportunities that most of us do. So the book challenges us to get outside yourself. Martin Luther King said the most piercing question is, what are you doing for others? And as we go through different phases in our life, we talk about in the book, the midlife stage, where you're 50 or 60 or a certain age and you feel like you're not very successful. I'm not where I thought I would be at this stage. Some people flip out and have a midlife crisis and do irresponsible and dangerous things instead of, gathering themselves and thinking, no, I may have made some mistakes. Maybe I'm not where I wanted to be yet, but what am I going to do the next 5 years? And then the pinnacle of success stage, like Jimmy Carter, very successful, becoming a president of the United States. But then what was he about after that? What contributions he made? The biggest challenge in life are life-changing setbacks and challenges, terrible things, tragedies sometimes that happen in our lives. How are we going to respond? In my home state of Utah, you've heard the story of Elizabeth Smart, the 14-year-old girl that was kidnapped out of her own bedroom at knife point and held for 9 months and abused terribly by a crazy person and another woman. And when she was finally found, I don't think anyone would blame her from just curling up in a ball the rest of her life and not doing much. But her mother, Lois Smart, told her, "This man has taken 9 months of your life from you. And, what are you going to do now? Don't let him take 1 minute more. The best thing you can do is to live a happy life, to go on, to forget this, to forgive him, to contribute, to find things that you can do that you're good at and not have this define you the rest of your life." And she's an incredible person. After that, almost year of abuse and being pulled away from her family, being kidnapped, she has gone on. She served a mission for her church. She went to college. She got married. She's got 3 kids. She's established the Smart Foundation, which is a great organization that helps other victims and people see that doesn't have to define them, what happened to them, that it wasn't their fault, that they can go on and live good and happy and productive lives, and that she's a victor, not a victim. And so, life challenges and setbacks are the hardest thing we face. How are we going to react when it happens, when you get divorced, when someone who you love dies, if you're diagnosed with a terrible disease? Are you going to live in crescendo or diminuendo? And the book is full of examples, inspiring true stories of people who are famous and non-famous who chose to live in crescendo despite great hardships. And because of that, like a person like Michael J. Fox, who had Parkinson's in his late 30s, and he had Parkinson's in the middle of his career. How is he going to respond to that? He said for a while he drank and he just tried to ignore it, and he was in denial. And then he realized the only choice he had in life, he had all other choices except whether or not he had Parkinson's. Everything else was up to him. And look what he's done He's the face of Parkinson's. He has raised $1 billion for Parkinson's development and research, and has made it acceptable to talk about it and to show the effects of Parkinson's, so that he's made great strides for people. But it was a moment of either live in crescendo or diminuendo, and there's examples of people like that all around us. If we just see them and imitate what they do, keep living in crescendo despite what circumstances we face. That's the challenge of this book.
And what a challenge! And like I said, when I read it, it was both, an invitation as well as a calling, that if you are being a little bit passive, and that's okay if that's where you're at, but maybe take that step forward and step into a mindset of being in crescendo.
Right. That's what we call the crescendo mentality. It's a perspective or a paradigm, my father would call it, like a pair of glasses that you put on that you see life through. And that is, you're going to live in crescendo, not diminuendo. You're going to keep learning, keep changing, keep growing, keep contributing, despite what life throws at you. And it will keep you alive and happier and more productive longer than living in diminuendo.
I love it. Cynthia, we've had you on for a while. Is there anything else about the book or anything else about the message that you would like to share that maybe we haven't brought up?
Well, I think we gave a good summary. There's a lot more in the book, but there were 3 things we were trying to do to give people hope that despite their past, despite things that have happened, your greatest work and contributions could still be ahead of you. Go find them. Go discover what else you can contribute while you're still living. The hope to inspire others, that to bring out your great potential within yourself. Try to be a mentor. Try to see worth and potential in another person and show it to them, so that they're so inspired by you that they believe what you're saying about them. And then just the challenge to keep at it, to keep living in crescendo. And sometimes, my father used to say, it's like going on an airplane. You get on the plane and you have a determined destination. Maybe I'm flying from Salt Lake to Georgia, where you are, to Atlanta. And when you're in the plane, the plane is sometimes, most of the time, off track. Maybe the headwinds are stronger, or maybe there's weather things, or there's different things. The pilot is constantly adjusting and getting back to where we're supposed to be. And most of the time you land, pretty much on time. You land pretty close to when you were expected to. And so he would use that to say, keep coming back, keep centering yourself, keep adjusting. You'll have setbacks. You'll have things that happen that are discouraging and challenging, but keep at it. Keep looking at your final destination, where you're going, where you want to be and end up, and keep adjusting to that. And you'll eventually get there. The fact that this book was published at all I had to live in crescendo to get the book published. It took 10 years after he passed away. We worked on it for a little while he was alive. And then when he passed away, it was up to me. And there were many dark days when I was writing at 2 a.m. on my computer, thinking, is this going to ever see the light of day? Is anyone going to read this? Will I find a publisher? It was my father's desire to have this be kind of his, I shouldn't say last contribution, because that would diminish living in crescendo, but to be part of his legacy. And things happened that brought it about. And I had to keep looking long term and down the road, that yes, this is going to happen, and I'm going to keep coming back and adjusting and absorb the challenges that happened. And eventually, it did. But I think we can bring about a lot of a good and cause a domino effect of good throughout the world if we just start small and begin. The hardest part is starting, choosing something, identifying what is my unique mission. Detect your mission inside you by being introspective and by observing your community and your family and causes that you feel are important, and then determining, how am I going to help? what skills do I have that I can lend to this? And just start small and begin, and you'll be amazed at what you can accomplish.
That is fantastic. I absolutely love that. Cynthia, for folks that want to get the book, and for folks that might want to get in contact with you, what's the best way for that to happen?
You could just buy it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. Franklin Covey. It's published by Simon & Schuster, so it's a great publisher, and it's pretty available, and it's even discounted now. It's been out for a couple of years. And then I'm just on LinkedIn. I don't do a ton of social media besides connection on LinkedIn, but that would be great. And I just hope that someone is listening that needs a little encouragement to maybe they're a cool grandpa. They want to be a cool grandpa. I think a cool grandpa would be one that would listen to this message and determine, I got to do more. I've got to, I do have some struggling grandkids. I do see great needs in my community that I can reach. I should serve in my church, in my community, instead of thinking, been there, done that, or I'm tired, or I don't have anything else to give. You really do. You're the greatest period, the most opportunity of your life is right now to serve and contribute and bless others. And you have that right in front of you. And what a legacy you could leave to your family and to those around you if you just choose to accept the challenge and get involved.
That's awesome. And Cynthia, thank you so much for being on the Cool Grandpa podcast. This has been a really great conversation.
I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. It's important to me to get this message out. And thanks for having me, Greg.
I so appreciated Cynthia coming on to this podcast to talk about this important book. One thing you guys don't know is that I caught Cynthia probably 2 days before she and her husband have left their 25 grandchildren to go and serve a church mission in northern Scotland and Ireland. They're out there for 18 months to 2 years to help support their church, to help support the people of Scotland and Ireland, and just be great members that can be of service to those communities out there. And that is an incredible way to model living life in crescendo, is being able to take that time away from the grandchildren to become a very long distance grandparent and go and serve a community that you know nothing about. So very appreciative to Cynthia for taking the time out right before she and her husband left to go serve that church mission. The other thing that I really wanted to talk about too is this idea that we can encourage each other to live life in crescendo. I think sometimes as we get older, we start to have physical issues pop up. We start to have different things that just come with getting older. I believe it's a great way that we can encourage each other and support each other as we have friends that have entered into the second half of life to really explore new interests, new hobbies, new ways to contribute into the community. I hope you had some great ideas pop into your head on how you can live life in crescendo, and I hope that you're going to be able to help support your friends, your family in living their lives in crescendo as well. So until next time, remember to stay cool. Thank you for listening to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and share it with a friend. That's the best way you can help us to expand our community, as well as get the news out about how valuable grandpas are in the lives of those kids. If you'd like to leave me a comment or shoot me a potential topic for this podcast, please go to www.cool-grandpa.us. Look for the comments tab, fill it out, hit submit. It's as easy as that. Until next time, remember to stay cool.